Welcome to Fellowship Safaris, conversations about people of color and their journeys to subspecialist training in their countries of origin and around the world. Hi everyone, welcome to Fellowship Safaris. It's really exciting to be able to sit here with my next guest, who is a pioneer. She doesn't think of herself as a pioneer, but I can assure you, you really want to listen in to the experiences that she's going to share. I'm not going to jump ahead. I am going to give her a chance to introduce herself and her professional qualifications.
Thank you so much, Njeri, and thank you for inviting me to this podcast. So my name's Maureen Njoroge. I am a medical doctor, a pediatrician, and a pediatric neurologist.
So why pediatrics? What drew you to going into pediatric training?
Right. So joining pediatrics was it just happened. How do I put it? It was a no-brainer for me. Going through internal medicine, going through surgery, and those rotations, when you do those rotations, even as a medical student, you get to work with adults, and I was just so sure me and adult medicine do not mix. So I had the best time in pediatrics, even in my undergraduate training. I enjoyed it fully. So for me, going to pediatrics was sort of a natural step.
It's so interesting every time I ask people about why their particular specialization, and it sounds like it was such a natural progression for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to jump a few steps ahead in terms of, yes, you've done some peds and started practicing. So how did the story about neurology come up, and what is this pediatrics neurology?
Right. So that one was a bit of a story. To be honest, after I did pediatrics, I started working in county government. I just realized that I was seeing a lot of patients who had cerebral palsy, who had epilepsy. And for sure, their quality of life, I felt, could be much better if I had more information about how to help them. So I just sat myself down and asked myself, okay, one, for the patients, who do you feel you would help the most by doing what? So for me, the answer was clear. It was the knowledge that I have in neurology was not to what I would expect to actually help the patients. And then I asked myself, if I was to do, let's say, something else, would I be happy? As in, would I wake up in the morning excited and overjoyed to go work? And as I was telling you before, I sat down and thought, if I did hemato-oncology, I think I would cry every single day. Like, I would see a patient and just go home and just wonder, as in what's happening. So I had to actually have that conversation with myself to make that decision for neurology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you called yourself for a meeting. I think we all need to call ourselves for a meeting every
Very
so
true.
often and just really ask those key questions, like what's going to fuel me versus what wouldn't, and what would make me feel more in the zone of my purpose and my calling versus if I get into this, man, it's just going to drain me. So I think it's really helpful that you've shared that perspective. So now you have this dream of pediatric neurology. How did you come about figuring out where you were going to get your training?
What I did is, once I came to the realization that, yes, this is what is going to make you happy, this is what you want to do, I now started knocking on people's doors. So I went and met a few neurologists, one of whom is a mentor. I went and sat down with them. One specific neurologist who recommended me, I went to his office and I told him, I feel like my life is leading me to neurology. Where do you think would be the best place to do neurology? How was your experience? So for him, he'd done his neurology in the UK. He said he liked the experience. He also suggested, think about the UK, find out about this institution. And then he was like, also check in South Africa and find out about it. And I was like, now you're telling me South Africa's xenophobia, really? It's like, no, as in you have to open your mind and think about it, right? So I went, did research for UK, found out, how long it is. I did research for Canada, checked South Africa. And then now I just looked at the number of years that I would be working in these places. And then remembered that I am a mother. I remembered that, yes, this is going to be this number of years in this place. But am I going to travel with my family? What am I going to do? So in terms of what helped me to choose to do the fellowship in Kenya is I realized that I couldn't be able to travel, with my family, and I needed to have my children there. So for me, getting an opportunity in Kenya actually was the best thing.
So I think it can't be understated that there are so many other things that come into play apart from the availability of the program itself. There's, do I have the money to go? Mm-hmm. Do I have the resources to support if I was going with my family versus if I was going alone, what happens to my family and the dynamics around that? And there are a couple of things that you've mentioned, and I don't want us to just, fly by them. There are two things you've talked about. One, you've talked about mentorship, mm-hmm. and the other one, you've talked about this decision impacting your family. So I'll start with family. How did you go about the conversation with your family, with your partner, about, hey, I want to go back to school and there's this consideration? What were some of the conversations?
For me, even bringing up the conversation for a different country was hard, despite the fact that I had the support. You can go do, that's fine, you go do this fellowship in another country, that's okay. But for me, I felt I couldn't handle it. So when the opportunity came to do that fellowship in Kenya, it was even easier for me to actually have that conversation. All right, so how is this going to be? How is it going to be in terms of finances, about the children? That conversation at least I could now have. It went well, as in it was, I had support, as in from my family, from extended family, in terms of, okay, so this is what you want to do. But it needed a lot of discussions in terms of finances because it's a pay cut. So how is the family going to survive on this new income? So mm-hmm. that discussion needed to be had. And at the end of it all, I think the decision was, all right, so let's just go into it and, hope for the best. You just enter into waters that you don't know, but hoping that it will work out. But I think it's an important discussion to have.
What were some of the other conversations that you had with your family and with your partner about going back to school? I ask this because a lot of people are like, you're not yet done reading. You've done so much with your career so far. So what were some of the other things that came up in conversation?
Well, in terms of partner, we're both in medicine. So that conversation wasn't hard. I think that my as in trying to explain this to my extended family that you did your master's, you went to school, did undergraduate, and then you went and did your master's. And now you want to go to school again to do a fellowship. That discussion was, why are you not just sitting down and making money? Why can't you go and work with, these private organizations? And then why are you going back to school? So that conversation was it's hard to explain why you want to go and do a subspecialty to extended family.
Mm-hmm.
I think in medicine, that, it's a continuous learning process. At some point, you tend to feel this drive, okay, let me go and, expand my knowledge in this particular thing that I'm feeling very passionate about. But explaining that to an extended family member that this calling that you usually say I have, I now have been called again. So that was difficult to make them understand. I still get asked, so now that you've, done a fellowship, are you now still going back to school? You better not be going back to school.
I have a name for it. I think I've just coined it. It's called the So Many Vijana Crisis.
Oh, yes.
Mwisho wa kusoma utapata kazi nzuri sana. So like that was the song that was playing a lot of the times. So I think there's a generation that just believes about that thing for finish school, start working. What is this? You've gone back to school. But then it's helpful to hear that, because I think a lot of families, when it comes to subspecialty, and families, friends, some guys just don't get it. So you've gone back. Now you're going back to do what? You're already at the top of your game. You're doing so fantastic. And I think it's so helpful to hear what your experience was in terms of some of those difficult conversations, and that they are necessary to start having, especially with your loved ones, because that means that that's more time away from them and spent on studying or practice and skill acquisition. And thank you for sharing that. The other one I wanted to ask you about is the impact that mentorship has had. How did you figure out, this particular person is going to be my mentor? What are some of the characteristics that you look at and say, yes, this is somebody I would like to mentor me? To start with, I think I have many questions about mentorship, but I think starting, what are some of the things you are looking for in a mentor at that stage?
I am not sure that I had thought about it in terms of that I'm looking for this person as I'm looking for a mentor in the first place. But then now looking back, that's truly what I was doing. I was actually looking for a mentor, and that was in undergraduate. There was a registrar who sort of had his life in order and went and did, I was doing pediatrics at the time, and I'm very good friends with his wife, and so they seemed to be having it figured out, When I started having discussions about school, they shared with me the struggles that they went through, and that actually helped me be able to navigate through, like, even masters. The drive that I could see, it helped me know that, this is what I want to do. The passion that this person has in their field, I would want to be passionate about that in something that I love. And I think that also guided me to not just go with the flow, anything is available, let me follow that, but to go to something that I actually love. In terms of neurology, now the neurologist that I spoke to, I used to work doing pediatrics as a resident. Is that legal to say?
No, it's legal. You have passed it. Just
yes.
Share your story.
Yes. So what happened is that he was running his clinic, and I was available to see patients, neurology patients. So when I went to his clinic, I was excited about it, as in seeing neurology patients and over there feeling like, I'm the one calling the shots. That was an amazing feeling. And, so that's how now we started discussing about neurology with a neurologist, and that's how he became my mentor, and he showed me how to navigate, how to think outside the box, like think about UK, think about South Africa, all these things.
It's really great to hear that some of the things that really resonated with you was, one, somebody who is vulnerable enough to be, open in terms of, this is my experience. It's not all perfect, because I think the problem with us is that we must present things perfectly. They must look perfect. They must look rosy, and that's what attracts people. However, what I'm hearing you saying is that actually what attracted you more to these conversations and this mentorship process is actually they were just being very open and honest about the whole picture. And also the fact that you're able to get somebody who identified that skill in you and that passion in you, allowed you to have some autonomy so that you can also experiment with how you're taking care of them, exposing you to, this is how things are done. And I think it's so important that you had these sort of two exposures, because you really thrived in that space. And to the mentors, because I know you're going to listen to this episode, we're giving you your flowers today, because this is the fruit of those conversations and that interaction and that investment in that relationship. And so thank you. How was the actual experience of studying neurology getting into that program and starting out? By the way, how many are you guys?
We were two.
Two. The first two.
Yeah.
To be clear, you are the first two of a new program
Yes.
that had been started out. And what year was this?
2020.
2020.
Mm-hmm.
So how was the training itself?
When I entered, I think, first of all, I was so excited to enter. As in the fact that there was neurology in Kenya and I didn't have to apply outside. I was just ecstatic. I was so excited about it. So the process of application, now I had to deal with the county, but then immediately I entered. The experience was nothing that I had prepared myself for in every way. It is the most I've ever read in my life. I kept, I think someone asked me for advice or like, as in how is it different from masters? I was like, I don't think I ever read like that for masters. For sure I didn't. So it's the most I've read ever. It was so different. It was so eye-opening. And then my fellowship was very different because it was a private facility. So navigating through the private system was very different. I enjoyed it, but I had to learn how to work within this setting that was very different from the public setting. And the fact that everything is available, as in if you want to do genetics for a patient, as in whichever test you want to do, it's there. You just have to ask for it. It just expanded my mind in so many ways. So it was very exciting. But then also, I entered in 2020 just when COVID was hitting.
Yeah, that was the other thing. When you said 2020, I was like, oh, man, COVID.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So you're going to a facility that has COVID patients, and you are wondering, I was just wondering, what am I going to, as in how is it going to work out now? As in how will I do this fellowship and it's COVID time, and then I bring COVID to my children, to the family. It was very hectic, trying to figure it out during that time. And then also people were trying to stay away from hospitals. So how is this experience going to be? Will there be patients or will it just be COVID that, we are dealing with? We were also so scared. We don't know what this disease is, you are wearing masks, you're sanitizing every 2 seconds. You're dreading going to work because you're like, I don't know whether today is the day that I die.
Oh my gosh. And then every time there was always a new syndrome associated with COVID that we didn't know about until you see a few patients and you're like, oh, this looks like COVID related, this or the other, which from a medical perspective was so overwhelming. The learning curve with COVID was so steep. Yeah, I get that.
The thing actually now, imagine you're doing neurology and you're seeing COVID-related complications in neurology. So everything you could see everything, strokes. And you're thinking, am I next? Like, is this going to happen? So that the anxiety around COVID was really great. But then with time, I think things sort of calmed down. People started knowing more. So patients started coming in, and when they came in, they came in. So it was now we are two. It was rigorous. We had to read and see patients. And again, that was, I learned resilience. I learned a lot. When I entered, we were given a curriculum.
Yes.
The curriculum was a book, and it was I can't, I'm just trying to show you with my hands how thick it was.
Yeah.
It was a thick book of the curriculum.
Oh,
yes.
Wow.
So I think it just went to show how much thought that they had when they were, trying to figure out this. We are starting a new program and these people are coming in and this is what we want them to have learned by the end.
Talk about that sort of like learning and mentorship process was in the program. How was that experience? Because you're transitioning from this was a colleague and then now you're transitioning into now you're a student. While you're not an undergraduate, you're coming in as a postgraduate, you have a wealth of experience and you're getting to interact with these, I want to call them neurology dons, as it were, how was that interaction? How was that learning environment with those hierarchies in place?
Let me just put it this way, in terms of my place, in that learning space. So you're in a place where there are interns, there are residents, and then there are, the consultants, and most of them are subspecialties. Now, I was coming in as a student, but in my own right, I'm a pediatrician. So at first, I think I was lost. I was like, where am I in this? As in, what does this mean? What is fellow? As in, am I a pediatrician still, or am I not a pediatrician? I was lost, because I'm like, now should I be, giving plans for pediatrics, or what should I do? But I think the good thing is that the neurology sort of took ownership of us. So what they did is that there was a clear difference between neurology and pediatrics. So that worked beautifully, because now I wasn't stuck there like, okay, now I know I'm a pediatrician. Should I now start, sorting out a patient who has come with gastroenteritis, as in, or should I stick to... So I stuck to my space. And that sort of protection from the neurologists made things just flow, because now I knew that if there is a neurology case, I'm supposed to be there. This is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Correct.
But if somebody else if there is a diarrhea or something, that's not my space, so that I don't also step where I'm not supposed to be stepping.
It's really interesting, because as a pediatrician, I find neurology so complex. I remember a friend of mine telling me that they had stayed at the house of a neurologist in training, and there were these images and pictures that had been stuck on all the walls, even in the bathroom, just so that you can learn the mapping of the brain and the brain's impact on so many different things.
Yeah.
And here you are telling me that you had teachers who advocated for you to focus on the thing that brought you here, which I think is so key. And a big shout out to the neurologists who did that, because if your teachers don't advocate and create a space of psychological safety, as it were, for you to be safe enough to feel, let me focus on my thing. Yes, there's all these other things that are happening, but my role is as a fellow in this subspecialty, and this is my work. So I think that it's helpful to hear that despite feeling lost in the beginning, just them being able to advocate for you and really push for you to focus really helped, sort of help you get out of the woods, so to speak, and find your path. So shout out to them as well. What were some of the highs of the training? Could you name a couple of things or a couple of experiences that you'd consider were your highs of the training?
Let me just say, the fact that I could be able to do what I loved every day was a pretty big high. And when you've worked in the public setup for a while, because I've honestly never left the public setup. So when you worked there for a while, there's so many gaps, in terms of how far somebody can go. You can't talk genetics when you're in the public setup if you don't have other things. You start
like
advocacy.
Funding,
exactly,
and other resources, right?
Yes. So you start, there's somewhere where you start advocating for before you reach to having a discussion about genetics. I just have this picture of this baby in my mind. He has cerebral palsy, and just seeing the journey that this child is walking, is talking, as in, when that child is walking and talking, you can't tell that this was the birth history. And it's so sad that if you were to take the same child probably to another setting, they may not thrive as much. But seeing the possibilities of what is out there in terms of medicine and how far, but there's a huge gap between private and public. It's so sad. But seeing how that can work, it was so eye-opening. Then the other high is that I got friends out of the training. We were together with one other person. So we become friends, and just, having colleagues who are now friends, I think that was a pretty big high.
I really love how collegial you are as neurologists and how open you are to working together, and that training further built up on that as a strength for you, and as, built that social network and that social support. I think for fellowship, because you don't realize, first of all, creating friendships in adulthood is so difficult.
It's hard.
Friendships and adulthood. I think there should be a separate podcast on adulting and friendships. However, the fact that you're able to create these relationships and lasting relationships can't be understated, and how that helps you in such a stressful learning environment. And so I'm really glad that you're able to get that. And even if you're just the two of you that started, I think that's really key, that even if they're in a different county, that you have this person that you can bounce off of and talk to and say, I have this case, or I'm dealing with this, and just have that person who gets you at that level. There's something else you had mentioned. Yes, there are these huge gaps between public and private. And at the same time, I think in the past few years, and we're going to see it continuing to shift, is that now we're getting more people going to subspecialty training. And hopefully that means that there's better accessibility, even if not the labs and all the resources. However, as a step, we'll have the subspecialist who can be able to make the diagnosis, who can be able to do the follow-up closer to people in various counties. Because you're in Nairobi and your colleague is in which county? Nyamira. When else did we have a neurologist in Nyamira? Now we have somebody who's in Nyamira who's able to take care of that region and be the point of, neurology referral in Western Kenya. So I just wanted to mention that, because I think that's so amazing to just hear just how much starting with the two of you has opened up a part of the country that before we wouldn't have, been thinking about. Were there some lows in the program, about your learning experience?
The low that I can truly remember feeling is when my daughter came and told me that she doesn't want to do medicine.
Oh.
And she was so she was just telling me, you come this late and you're leaving this early. I don't want to become a doctor. I was like, wow, I have impacted you, but in a negative way.
You're still mentoring, but then not in the direction.
Yes.
Wow, that must have been hard.
That was so hard. That was so hard. So now I had to, sit her down again and tell her, this is only for a season. Like, it's not forever that I'm going to be, and I'm in school, like you're in school. So I'm supposed to be in school at a certain hour. I'm supposed to leave school at a certain hour. And it's only for this season of, my life and your life. And it's going to be a time when, I won't be coming home this late. So I think that sort of reassured her that it won't be a forever thing, that, I hate this profession because it's causing my mother not to come early and all that. But now she's in a good space. Now she's
because she sees you.
Now she sees me. So she's so
but that mom guilt though.
Oh yes.
That mom guilt, I think
that killed me. Yeah, but now we are good.
We're good now. I remember for me, my daughter, when people would ask her where I am, she would actually say, Mama's sleeping. Because when I was home, that's all I would do. Sleep before my next shift or my next clinic or my next class. And of course, like, I can laugh, haha, now. But then at that time, I don't think people knew that necessarily she had a mom. Like, I wasn't present as much as I would have wanted to be. And so that mom guilt thing, there's no way around it. And sometimes even all the conversations that you have with people it's just going to be for a short time. But that short time is still so painful as a mom who's in fellowship. So I'm glad that your daughter has healed from that. I'm sure still at the back of her mind, she's like, I'm still not going into medicine, and I'm glad to have my mom back.
Yes, now she's, at that time, she was like, no, I'm doing art. I'm going to become an artist. And
nice.
I was like, do that. It's okay.
It's okay. We allow you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. thinking about like books or any movies that you read, even if it was before the program or during or even after, are there some books or movies that had an impact or are having an impact in how you practice and who you are as a person right now?
Right. So, to be honest, I'm not a big self-help book reader. So, I read a lot in terms of novels. I can finish 2 in a week.
Fiction. Love it.
I was gifted a self-help book the other day, and I took a month to finish it. It was good, but it just there's no storyline.
It just wasn't your thing.
Yes.
You want a story.
I want a story. I want it to help me relax and go into another world.
Yeah. So what are the books that will make you read 2 of them a week? Who are the authors that you really love?
So, let me jump that answer.
Because I heard you talking about
John Grisham. Yes, so it's just any novel that will take me into another time. For me, it's a good read. So I usually don't even look at who is writing the book or all that, just that there is a story. Although right now, I can say that I'm very proud of myself. I was just gifted a book, Who Moved My Cheese?
Yeah.
I'm on page 2. But
it's a step in
the right direction.
I love it. And what are some of the other things that you found that helped, like with your mental health during your fellowship?
So again, the books, I read novels. So the good thing about the internet is if you just want a book like a novel on law, you just Google that and then you can get free PDF books. So for me, even when I was in fellowship, I used to have like a cheat weekend whereby I'm not reading, neurology that day. I'll just go and read a novel. And it would be online, and it was those quick reads, and then after that you feel zen. Yes.
I've had my moment of cheating.
Yes. And then the other thing that I did, especially at the end, just before I start my exams, I started going to the gym, which I've never ever done before, as in I never used to do really. But then I started going and I went because I wanted, mental health, wellness, all that. So, and I actually went and told the trainer, I'm here. I don't want to change anything. I just want to be in a good mental space. So don't give me lifting weights.
Because that's not my thing.
That's not my thing. Yes.
I just need my endorphin rush.
Yes.
And so that I feel good and leave.
Exactly. So that's what I did. Of course, trainers will still tell you to lift weights, but it helped. Something about the gym sort of makes you not stressed.
Yeah.
So that helped.
Yeah. No, that's great to hear. And, it's really helpful to hear because those are some practical things that you are able to do during a very busy time that helped you. And I really love the fact that she was like, this is a cheating weekend where I don't read neurology. I just sink myself into a book. I love that. And in terms of when you think about overall in the fellowship, do you have any regrets?
Regrets. I feel like regret is a big word. So I wouldn't say that I regretted anything. I have so much resilience now. I have learned so much. I am super grateful, to be honest, about how much I've learned. And I truly can't say that I regret this because I feel like every single, even the COVID, as in, I feel like, and I got COVID, did I say? Oh. I got COVID and I thought I was going to die. And I went home with a pulse oximeter and I was like, okay, am I dying now? As in, what time is
that's tough.
Yeah, that's
tough.
Yeah. That's tough. So I don't feel like, and I love it for me to say that because I feel like then I lived that life.
And you're able to have thrived, not just survived that season, but you actually thrived in that season. And so what would your words of advice or your nuggets of wisdom be for somebody who's thinking about doing a subspecialty or even doing a subspecialty in neurology? What would be your words of advice for somebody?
I think for sure call yourself for a meeting. Jite kwa mkutano.
Call yourself for a meeting. I love it.
Yes, because you really need to know what it is that you love. You can't. I don't think it's advisable to just go because something is available, because honestly, truly knowing myself, I know I would have been miserable had I done something else. So for me, the thought of, you have to think about it. You wake up every day to go do this thing. Are you excited to wake up to go do that thing? And the fact that I was excited to wake up and, do neurology, it showed me that this is a correct thing. So you have to love what you choose. That's number one. 2 is finances. You have to really know, if you're not being funded, have a plan. Even if you're being funded, if that funding is not matching what you were making before, have a plan, because it's going to impact your family. And, finances is never the best thing to have issues on. So just make sure that you've arranged and find a way to plan your finances.
Mm-hmm.
And go with an open mind. Expect anything. I think I went expecting that, it's going to be, there's going to be reading, but the amount of reading was way above what I thought it would be. Know that even if that's what you like, you're going to be pushed past your limit and you need to rise up to the occasion.
Yeah. I absolutely love that. And what would you say to somebody? So there's a new program, because you guys were the first, which I think takes a lot of courage. It doesn't even have a track record yet. You are the track record.
That is so true. Yes.
So what would you say to somebody who is thinking about a program, and they'll be the first, as in experimentation technically will be done on them in terms of a program being rolled out? What would you say to this person going into a new program? Yeah, what would your words of advice be?
I would say look at who is behind this new program. For me, I felt confident because I knew that the people who are making this program, that, they have the backing, like they had the backing of, other institutions. They took the curriculum from, they mix curriculum from South Africa, from the UK. There was a merge of things, so that you're sure that what you're going to learn is not just the Kenyan experience, but you're learning, the same thing that you're doing is what somebody else in another country is doing.
A more global sort of picture in terms of your training.
Yes, so that there is not a difference that you're learning in Kenya and somebody else says learning in South America or Europe, but you're all learning the same thing. So that same curriculum, I felt, was a very good thing. So for somebody who's doing that, who wants to join a local program, just make sure that there is also that you're doing a curriculum that is for the world.
Global.
It
has that global coverage, and you have those protocols and curriculum in space that is actually standardized at a global level, which is what I'm hearing the neurology program aims to do, or has been able to do, at least with the first few cohorts that have come out of it. I think it's really great that you are able to share that and be able to experience that, straight out the gate. And I think for somebody who, again, like the way you shared, you thought through, what are my options? Right now, going out of the country is not my option. And there's an opportunity to, pursue my passion in the country. And not feel like you're at a loss because you're doing it in Kenya versus somebody who's doing it, in another country, in another continent. You're getting a very high level of education, and you're getting the backing from a faculty that is invested in bringing out that global scale neurologist, so to speak. So I really want to say a big thank you. I know, like you said, you're an introvert and this is very out of pocket for you. And at the same time, I value the fact that you're able to be very open about what your experience was. And I thank you so much for taking the time to share these experiences with us.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, this is new podcast, but thanks. That was an experience. Thank you so much. And again, as you said, shout out to the mentors. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't led into the correct path. And And to the lecturers who, I feel I have been shaped and molded into who I am because of so many people, and I'll forever be grateful.
And all of you, peweni flowers. Get your flowers, receive your flowers. We'll not mention all of you by name. However, I do know you will listen to this podcast. It's our hope that you listen to this podcast episode. Okay, guys, so I look forward to being able to interact with you and hearing what you have to say about this episode. Is there a way that if people want to get in touch with you, the public, is there a way that they can be able to get in touch with you?
Right. So I think I'd share my email address. So drmuthoninjoroge @gmail.com. So for sure, if there are questions about, fellowship, what to do, how to navigate, I'm happy to answer.
Fantastic. And we will also have it as part of the show notes so that you're able to reach out to Maureen directly. I don't want to be the person who's a barrier to this awesomeness. So thank you, everyone. And until next time, bye. I'm so glad you stayed tuned. Please get the word out and share it with at least 3 people. Make this episode like a chain letter. Share it, share it, share it. Come back for the next leg of our safari where we'll be talking about...
My big thing is women's health. Right. Even though I've gone to a subspecialist level, I've always had an interest in general women's health. And this is the full spectrum from when people start getting periods to when the periods end.
Listeners are advised to use their own judgment and discretion when applying any information discussed in this and all podcast episodes to their specific situation. Always seek the advice of a qualified professional if you have any concerns or questions regarding a particular subject matter. This episode was sponsored by the Kenya Paediatric Fellowship Program. The overall goal of Kenya Paediatric Fellowship Program is to expand the capacity of training institutions to select, train, and deploy quality pediatric subspecialists, midwives, and pediatric nurses, and address the shortage and inequitable distribution of specialized child health workforce in the Kenyan public sector. You can find this and other episodes of this podcast on our website at www.fellowshipsafaris.org. You can also find all our episodes on all podcast platforms. Reach out to us on social media as Fellowship Safaris on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and our Twitter handle is @fellowshipsafar. You could also send us an email on fellowshipsafaris@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you and interacting with what you have to say about the Fellowship Safaris podcast. It takes a village to make this podcast. The executive producer and original music is done by Mokavi Maweu. The sound engineer is Tevin Sudi with thanks to AQ Studios. Graphic design was done by Benjamin Mboya. We would like to give a special shout out to Josephine Karianjahe and Melissa Mbogwa of Africa Podfest. All rights reserved by Dr. Njeri Karianjahe and the Fellowship Safaris podcast.